Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we are going to take a fully spoilery look at Chapter 34 of Kaiju number 8, and whoo boy, was this the emotional ringer. Not that we expected anything else, really, but wow, and the level of detail and the attention to the science is just, So, here's the obligatory several seconds of time I give you to click away so as to avoid the spoilers. While you are waiting to catch up on Kaiju number 8, you can click the links below the video to go check out my science fiction comedy book, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, a book of human absurdity, available on Barnes & Noble, Kobo by Rakuten, Google Books, and of course, Amazon. So go check out that, then come back to share the heartbreak that is the spoilers for Chapter 34 of Kaiju number 8. So, I've already done an overview. You can go listen to that if you like, but I just have to talk about all the different ways the details of this chapter tie into each other, how they all world build, and how they confirm things that we have been suspecting from the beginning. The author just packs so much into these chapters. First, there is the opening scene with an exhausted Reno and company chilling in the Fleet parking lot. The Fleet parking lot is, if you have any organization that has its own vehicles, that's called the Fleet. And this is such a wonderful detail. Anyone who has served in the military or worked in a national park service will know this moment. You've been doing hard physical grunt work all day. Not the work you love to do that you trained in university to do, but the work that you have to do to support the work that you love. You changing tires, checking oil, checking air pressure. You now want to hide from your superiors while you have a drink to cool down. The best place to do this is leaning against the giant tires of the big rigs of the Fleet, the warm rubber that has been absorbing the heat of the day. This is a very real moment that happens thousands of times a day all over the world. And why not do this in a break room? Well, because in this situation, the break room was either destroyed by the Kaiju or is now being used as some sort of planning center for the rebuilding efforts at Tachikawa Base. Now, from the looks on their faces, you can tell that not one of these four there have really processed what happened yet. They all just look shell-shocked. Reno, Haru, all of them. And why haven't they managed to process this? Because they've been kept far too busy to think repairing the base. Part of that is logical and simply a matter of the consequences of the previous chapter being recognized by the next chapter. There was a lot of damage to the base and it needs to be repaired and all hands have to work on it. But later in the chapter we find out that Mina has already submitted her report on how Kafka isn't a Kaiju threat, and we find out that Commander Shinomiya is having none of that idea. It is very possible that the 3rd Division in general, and these four in special, this group, the faint in the bathroom from chatting about Mina group, are friends of Kafka and being kept too busy to think. Then they all get called out of their morose nest of rest and summoned to the captain's office, where they are told that they are being transferred. Now again, this is very logical from the perspective of what Mina and the High Command will admit to. Their current base, which is the main training base in Japan, as Reno pointed out way back in Chapter 3, is no longer suitable to train in. So instead of cycling new recruits through this base for added training, all the top rookies will be cycled through other divisions for cross-training. Logical, practical, and way suspicious. The higher-ups are deeply concerned about more Kaiju infiltrators. We've seen that. There is absolutely no reason for them to assume that Kafka is the only Kaiju in the Defense Force right now. Every rookie that came in at the same time as he did, or immediately before or after, is suspect. This movement of the rookies will allow unbiased observation of all the rookies as they seek out any other human Kaiju. Also, Commander Shinomiya has that handy document on his desk giving testimony to how much the 3rd Division thinks of Kafka. I bet the recording of Kafka in the bathhouse kibitzing it up with Reno, Iharu, Kakuragi, and Izumo is known to him, is in his possession as well. Transferring these four to different divisions conveniently breaks up the only group of powerhouses that are loyal enough to Kafka to consider breaking him out and powerful enough to actually do something about it. Then we have the fascinating dynamic between father and daughter in the scene between the two Shinomiyas, moving on to the next major scene. I could talk for a whole video on that alone, but I want to point out something very interesting. When Commander Shinomiya directly insults Private Shinomiya, her logic over her logic in coming to him, or her lack of logic in coming to him to speak for Kafka, it hardly phases her. Commander Shinomiya correctly points out that the 3rd Division's own captain has already thoroughly filled him in on everything that Kafka has done, and that Private Shinomiya coming to him officially as a subordinate and forming an officer of something is pointless and a waste of time. And as much as it pains me to admit it, given how brutal he was right. Now, Kikoru's response to this is very interesting. She is distinctly offended when he calls her a fool, but doesn't seem particularly hurt by it. In fact, the only time she's seen hurt is when he points out on a personal note that she shouldn't have sympathy for Kaiju number 8 because he is just like the Kaiju who killed her mother. And the memory of that pain shows on Kikoru's face. So Kikoru isn't deliberately keeping her pain from her father. She just didn't feel any intense personal pain when he insulted her competency as an officer, possibly because she probably agrees with his assessment of her actions. The really fascinating thing happens after that then. Private Shinomiya turns to leave as Commander Shinomiya ordered, but she stops, and then Kikoru, the daughter of Aiso, speaks out. "Daddy, even so, I still want to believe in him." And she is utterly fearless when she says this. She does not seem to expect at all any negative response from her father, or that if he does have a negative response, it won't be anything she needs to fear. And her father does not seem to have a negative reaction to this. He just looks tired and maybe a little sad. So when the private wastes the commander's time by repeating information he already has from her commanding officer, the commander is cold and harshly reprimands the private. However, when the daughter states her sentiment of loyalty against all logic and evidence to the father, this is not reprimanded at all. It seems that the Shinomiyas have rigidly separated their two relationships. There is actually a fairly little emotion involved in the professional relationship. Yes, she wants his approval, but she doesn't expect it, and she's kind of come to live with that. He is just her commander, and she is just the private. However, in their personal relationship, they actually seem to have a much healthier relationship than we would have expected from the flashbacks. Her father is willing to listen to her even if he thinks she is being utterly stupid. She knows that he will listen to her and has faith that he won't lash out at her even if she makes a statement of sentiment that flies in the face of the evidence that he has literally just shown her. Remember, when he showed Kikoru the x-ray, she tried to deny the validity of the evidence. She didn't deny that if it was true, it would make Kafka a kaiju and not a human. So she seems to be in agreement with the commander about the evidence at least. All in all, the whole interaction speaks to a much more complicated and tender emotional bond between father and daughter than I think that any of us were expecting. It points to the idea that perhaps it is only in that one field, that of her calling as a kaiju killer, that her father holds her to these outrageous standards, and that outside of overdoing the no nepotism standards that he clearly enforces in their relationship, their relationships is, if not chill, at least a whole lot less intense than we thought. Then we have that awesome scene at the end. And this is where I think that as a scientist, I have to hold an unpopular opinion in that Commander Shinomiya did nothing wrong. He did not go in there to torture Kafka pointlessly. He went in there to perform a necessary scientific action that could not have been done any other way. He went in himself instead of sending in the scientist because as a classic good commander, he was not going to let anyone else take a risk that he wasn't going to take himself. I will do a whole video on this later, but the short version of it is this. The scientists at the Defense Force need biochemical data to figure out if Kafka is human or not. For a variety of pragmatic reasons, there is no way that the commander can risk just offing Kafka. Kafka is far too valuable, both as Kaiju number 8 as a potential weapon, as a source of information about how he was transformed, and as a scientific study. So the scientists have to know what is what, and that means, quite simply, a blood draw. However, when Kafka is in human mode, he cannot be detected as a kaiju. And when he's in a kaiju mode, he cannot be detected as a human. So to figure out how the two halves interact, they have to draw blood when he is partly transformed. Also, it appears, from what we've seen in previous chapters, that any tissue removed, probably up to and including blood, dissipates and is basically just not there anymore once they remove it from the body. Now, they don't trust Kafka, and if they explained all this to him, he might do something funny to the blood. So they need to surprise him with the blood draw. So Commander Shinomiya steps up and does it himself, not willing to subject any of his subordinates to it, and quite frankly, probably none of the subordinates probably could put a scratch in Kafka. First, because the commander tests the theory to see if a direct attack will cause Kafka to transform, and also uses to gauge his response. Seeing that yes, Kafka partially transformed but stayed mostly human, and no, he didn't return the attack, Commander Shinomiya stepped forward and drew the blood with his gloved hand to avoid contamination from his own suit. To keep Kafka from figuring out what he was doing and messing with the sample before he had time to draw it, the commander kept Kafka talking and focused on defending himself verbally from the commander's utterly brutal accusations, namely that he wasn't human. Now, I'm not saying that the commander didn't derive some satisfaction from the interaction, but there was nothing necessarily cruel about it. It was strictly necessary. It was what needed to be done for Kafka's sake as much as to further the scientific understanding of the situation that will be the base of the decision the Defense Force makes going forward. So the TLDR version, Commander Shinomiya did nothing wrong, at least in this scene. So that's my 2 cents on this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and a comment and let me know what you think. Am I giving the commander too much credit? Hit that subscribe button and check out Humans Are Weird. I Have the Data, a book of human absurdity, at the links in the description. Peace out, my wonderful viewers.
The book from author Betty Adams, Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, is a humorous look at human behavior through the eyes of aliens. This book is arranged in separate reports or essays, documenting the experiences with humanity through the lens of the aliens who have to interact with them. This anthology of short stories and vignettes from alien points of view highlights some of humanity's quirks we can all relate to. Author Betty Adams captures how strange and interesting humans can really be. This is a fun collection of stories you will really get a kick out of. Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data, from author Betty Adams. Order your copy right now on Amazon.